After producing the first volume of the most obscure FPS games almost 2 years ago, I have always wanted to make an even better follow-up, featuring more obscure games worth looking into. Of course, not all of the games I'll be showing you are good, but if you're looking into clunky and sometimes fun, janky games, stick around. Released in 2004 by Human Head Studios, the folks behind Prey, and published by Atari, Dead Man's Hand is a spaghetti western FPS. I stumbled upon it a couple of weeks ago and honestly deserves a second look. Not because it's a masterpiece, but because it's the kind of messy fun we don't see much anymore. You play as Tae-yoon, a young gunslinger who used to ride with a gang called the Nine. They betray him and he sets out to settle the score the only way a western hero knows how, with a bullet to the head and a whole lot of attitude. The real draw here isn't the gunplay, it's the awkward but amazing dialogue. Every time Tae-yoon confronts one of the Nine, you get exchanges so cringy they're almost performance art.
I'm surprised to see you kill so many men, Taehoon. I never thought you had the stomach for killing.
I've had time to work up a hunger for killing the ones that deserve it, Flatiron.
It's pure B-movie gold and it gives the game more charm than it has any right to. The gameplay is fine. The movement is quite clunky and aiming feels a bit off, but there's still something satisfying about blasting through saloons, bottles and train yards while everything around you explodes. You're rewarded for headshots and destruction. The more chaos you cause, the higher your score. The sound design though, it's a mixed bag. Guns sound weighty and sharp, but explosions are absurdly loud, especially when you blow up a cluster of barrels. Where Dead Man's Hand really earns points is in its style. The dusty ghost towns, the echoing canyons, the twangy guitar riffs. It nails that spaghetti western vibe. It's not Red Dead Revolver or Call of Juarez by any stretch, but it scratches the same itch if you want something simpler and rougher around the edges. Visually it's aged better than you'd expect. The sepia tones and exaggerated environments gives it a comic book look that works in its favor. Even though the game's been considered abandonware for years and isn't sold anywhere, it still runs surprisingly well on modern PCs. I had no crashes or bugs, just some resolution issues which can be fixed with a few simple tweaks if you can handle some jank and a few design quirks. Dead Man's Hand is worth digging up. It's fun, ridiculous, and charmingly unpolished. The kind of game that knows exactly what it is and leans into it. It's not a masterpiece, but it's a forgotten western shooter with personality, and in a sea filled with polished shooters. That's refreshing.
I'd buy you a drink, but I'd rather shoot you.
Released in 2004 by Nuclear Vision Entertainment and published by Whiptail Interactive, Psychotoxic is one of these early 2000 shooters that aimed high and fell hard. It mixes futuristic gunfights with apocalyptic fantasy wrapped around a story that swings between cool and completely absurd, and that is, honestly, part of its charm. You play as Angie Prophet, a half-human, half-engine heroine fated to stop the Fourth Horseman from ending the world in the year 2022. It is the kind of over-the-top plot only games from that era could pull off with a straight face, and for a brief moment, it works. The setup promises something bold, a shooter with supernatural flair, but Psychotoxic can't quite decide what kind of game it wants to be. Is it a shooter, a sci-fi, a horror game, or an action-adventure? God help me if someone knows. At its best, the game has flashes of real potential. You blast through enemies, collect health kits, and occasionally unleash superpowers like bullet time, a shield, or health regeneration. Bullet time is especially fun, but the game rarely lets you use it, which feels like a wasted potential. Enemy encounters are brutal. They shoot fast, hit hard, and never miss. Health packs are generous, but the game expects lightning reflexes, because by the time you open a door, an enemy has already shot you in the face. It's more punishing than it needs to be, and not always in a fair way. Here is where the game shows both its best and worst sides. Some levels are painfully generic. Long hallways, dull textures, nothing memorable. But then you hit the dream worlds and suddenly the game wakes up. The dream sequences are strange, surreal, and genuinely creative. They bend reality in ways that makes you stop and look. Think something like American McGee's Alice, but even weirder. These sections hint at the game's untapped potential, showing what Psychotoxic could have been if that imagination had carried through the entire design. Unfortunately, the rest of the campaign slips back into the usual routine FPS territory, compared to other cult shooters from that era like Chaser or Requiem Avenging Angel. Psychotoxic doesn't quite stand out in terms of structure or pacing. If you try running the game today, prepare for some headache. The game has issues with modern hardware. Cutscenes often refuse to play and loading times drag on for no reason. It's playable, but only if you're patient or willing to go through hoops. You'll have a love-hate relationship with Toxic. It is frustrating, weird, and occasionally brilliant. When it leans into its dreamlike atmosphere, it shines, but too often it buries that creativity under bland design and uneven difficulty. Still, for fans of forgotten shooters with big ideas and rough executions, it's an interesting relic of its time. I've had Shellshock 2 Blood Trails on my radar for years. Everyone seemed to hate it, calling it one of those forgotten shooters no one dares to touch. Curiosity got the better of me a couple of years ago. I played it, finished it, and yeah, I won't be touching it again either. Developed by Rebellion Entertainment and released in 2009, Shellshock 2 is the follow-up to Shellshock NAM 67, which was created by Guerrilla Games, the studio behind Killzone and Horizon Zero Dawn. On paper, it sounds like a solid lineage. In practice, it's a mess. The setup is standard enough. You play as an American soldier in Vietnam searching for his twisted brother. So far so good. A grounded military premise with potential for tension and mystery. But then, the game introduces a virus called White Knight which turns people into zombies. That is the point where everything falls apart. The early missions before the virus nonsense actually have a spark of intrigue. You fight enemy soldiers, explore eerie jungles, and start wondering what's really going on.
What is going on? And where is Andy? And what is going on?
Then the zombies show up, and it's like the game completely forgets what it was doing. The story nosedives into boredom, and you're left blasting the same infected enemies over and over and over, while running out of ammo every few minutes. The game tries to offer replay value with two endings, a good and a bad one, but there's a problem you should know about. If you want to see the alternate ending, you have to replay the entire game from the start, and I don't think it's worth the trouble. Mechanically, Shellshock is okay. It's serviceable, the shooting works, the controls are responsive, and it surprisingly runs well on modern hardware. But everything else, the level design, graphics, sound, and pacing, feels flat and uninspired. There's no tension, no atmosphere, just a steady rhythm of shoot, die, and repeat. Ammo scarcity could have added tension, but instead it just makes the combat tedious. The original Shellshock NAM 67 at least had a personality, gritty, grim, and grounded. Blood Trails, on the other hand, trades that for a half-baked zombie apocalypse that doesn't fit its setting or tone. Vietnam should feel claustrophobic and humid. Here, it just feels empty. Visually, it's bland. The music, forgettable. The environments, repetitive. Nothing stands out. Not the lightning, not the effects, not even the supposed horror. Shellshock 2 Blood Trails is a prime example of wasted potential. It could have been a gritty war story with psychological edge, but instead it leans on a zombie plot that derails everything. It runs fine today, but that's about the nicest thing you can say about it, unless you're digging through the bottom of the FPS barrel for curiosity's sake. There's no reason to play this one. What we've got here is basically a first-person Indiana Jones clone, and I mean that in the best way possible. Deadfall Adventures wears its inspirations proudly, borrowing from Indiana Jones, Tomb Raider, and even a touch of Uncharted. Developed by the Farm 51, the same studio behind cult shooters like Necrovision and Painkiller, Hell and Damnation. Deadfall Adventures was released in 2013 and aims to bring that classic pulp adventure energy to the first-person shooter genre. You play as James Lee Quatermain, the great-grandson of King Solomon's mines explorer, Alan Quatermain. You find yourself traveling the globe in the 1930s, chasing artifacts, shooting Nazis and communists, solving puzzles, and fending off mummies. It is a ridiculous setup, but it completely leans into the Indiana Jones types of adventures, and that is what makes it fun. I have found the treasure hunting mechanic to be a nice touch. Scattered treasures can be collected to upgrade your stats, giving you a reason to actually stop and appreciate the environments instead of sprinting through them. But here's the thing that you should know about. Deadfall Adventures isn't revolutionary, the shooting is okay, and action never really surprises you. But it is still a blast to play. There's a certain charm to mowing down Nazis, torching mummies, and sprinting through crumbling ruins while solving ancient puzzles. Combat could have been better. Weapons don't always feel powerful, and there's not much variation in enemy behavior, but the mix of action and exploration keeps you going. The environments are the game's biggest strength. From Egyptian tombs to Arctic ruins and Guatemalan temples, every area feels distinct and beautifully designed. The puzzles are clever without being frustrating, and the tone is lighthearted with enough humor to keep things from feeling too serious. The game's not without flaws. Bugs pop up occasionally, sometimes forcing you to reload a checkpoint. It's a little rough around the edges, but not a huge deal breaker. Deadfall Adventures is a double-A gem. Not perfect, not polished, but packed with personality. It is exactly the kind of game that reminds you how fun adventure shooters can be when they're not trying to be cinematic masterpieces. Some games sabotage themselves, and Turning Point Fall of Liberty is one of them. The concept had real promise, a world where the Nazis won World War II and invaded the United States in 1953. The idea of fighting back against a Nazi-occupied America should have been gripping, but somewhere between concept and execution, everything fell apart. Developed by Sparkle Limited and released in 2008, Turning Point imagines an alternate history where the Axis powers dominate. Resistance is nearly wiped out, and the few remaining fighters are left to claw back control of their own soil. On paper, it sounds like a dream project for any alternate history shooter fan. In practice, it's a poor man's Wolfenstein without the bite. You play as a construction worker who becomes an unlikely resistance fighter after witnessing the Nazi invasion firsthand. The opening of the game is quite cinematic. Skyscrapers collapsing, zeppelins dropping troops over Manhattan, and madness everywhere. The first 15 minutes show promise. Then, unfortunately, the game settles into a monotonous loop of shooting identical soldiers, scavenging their weapons, and moving to the next generic battlefield. The setting could have carried the story, an occupied America filled with propaganda, fear, and rebellion, but the game never does anything meaningful with it. There's no sense of danger or oppression, just corridor after corridor of lifeless environments. The gunplay is the weakest link. Every weapon feels weightless, with no impact or feedback. You shoot enemies, but it barely feels like you're hitting anything. There's no punch, no rhythm, no pulse, no satisfaction in the combat. Just a hollow bang-bang routine that never evolves. There's also little incentive to explore. The levels, often set in a bombed-out buildings or ruined streets, look the same from start to finish. There's no hidden lore, no collectibles, no surprises. Despite its strong premise, Turning Point completely wastes its alternate history potential. Imagine a game that could have explored propaganda-filled cities, occupied neighborhoods, and resistance cells fighting in secret. Instead, you get a repetitive shooter. Visually, it doesn't hold up. The environments look bland, and the sound design doesn't help. Guns lack power, the music is forgettable, and the overall experience is flat. Turning Point isn't an awful game, just a disappointing one. Sparkle Limited had an ambitious idea but couldn't deliver the gameplay to match it. The world building is intriguing. The premise is genius, but the execution needed more work. Urban Chaos Riot Response is one of those rare shooters that's just pure fun and honestly deserves a sequel. Developed by Rocksteady Studios and released in 2006 for the PlayStation 2 and Xbox, Urban Chaos stands out as one of the best underappreciated FPS games of its generation. If I had to compare the game to something else, I'd say this one is like a SWAT Global Strike Team, but faster, tougher, and more balanced between tactics and all-out action. The game encourages both restraint and aggression. You can arrest suspects when the situation allows, or drop them when they come charging at you with a knife or a flaming bottle. You go through various missions where you'll be rescuing civilians, defending zones, and taking down gang members across gritty city streets, burning buildings, and riot zones. The combat feels responsive and the controls are tight. However, the Riot Shield is what sets Urban Chaos apart. It is not just a gimmick, it is a real gameplay tool that lets you block gunfire, deflect thrown weapons, and control the pace of battle. Combine that with tasers, shotguns, and some brutal melee takedowns, and every encounter feels visceral and satisfying. Headshots are incredibly rewarding, and the game's feedback, sound, animation, pacing makes every firefight hit hard. It is an arcade-style shooter that still feels grounded with just enough realism to sell the setting. For a PS2-era title, Urban Chaos looks fantastic. The environments are detailed, the lightning sells the tension, and the fire and debris effect still holds up. Each mission feels distinct, with just enough environmental variety to keep things fresh. It is honestly baffling this game never made it to PC. It runs beautifully on original hardware and emulators today, and its gameplay holds up surprisingly well. Cold Winter, my beloved. This game had all the ingredients for a trilogy: solid mechanics, sharp gunplay, and a ton of potential. A follow-up was actually planned, but later morphed into 50 Cent Blood on the Sand. Developed by Swordfish Studios and released in 2005 exclusively for the PlayStation 2, Cold Winter is one of those rare shooters that never got the attention it deserved. It's a gritty espionage FPS that feels like a cross between GoldenEye and Siphon Filter, with surprisingly tight gameplay for its time. The setup is typical. You play as a British secret agent caught in a global conspiracy involving terrorists, stolen intel, and a madman bent on ending all of us. It is not exactly revolutionary, but it does enough to keep the missions moving. However, where the story plays it safe, the gameplay is a different matter. This is where Cold Winter shines. The gunplay feels fantastic, weapons have real weight and impact, Headshots make heads explode, shotguns make limbs come off, and honestly, every bullet you shoot feels satisfying. The AI is also smarter than you'd expect. Enemies flank, use cover, and even flip tables to create makeshift barricades. The same trick you can pull yourself. That little touch alone adds a layer of realism and interactivity. Combat is tight and aggressive. If there's a weak spot, it is the story and presentation. The writing is not that immersive, and the visuals, while serviceable, never reach the level of the gameplay's polish. But when the shooting feels great, you tend to ignore these flaws. Cold Winter is an obscure PS2 shooter that deserved more recognition and honestly a sequel. It combines smart AI, punchy gunplay, and clever mechanics into a package that still holds up today.